Presto Chessers! I'd love to share a puzzle with you guys that I myself composed actually. And as you can see from the evaluation bar, white has a large advantage in this initial position, but they're about to blunder with the move. H takes G6. Uh-oh. Alright, we'll come back to what white should have played to keep that large advantage, but for now, let's try to find black's only good move. There's actually only one move, otherwise white will retain their large advantage. I definitely advise you guys to pause your videos right now, as it's pretty tricky in my opinion. And while your video is paused, if you haven't already, I'd love for you to subscribe to my channel, even leave a comment and share would be majorly appreciated. Alright, before we get to the answer, let's go over some tempting tries that black could do just to show that they only have one good move in this position. Alright, first one, what if we just go right away for the kill? We're threatening queen to b1 check. Unfortunately, this will not work because white will take this pawn. We'll take back, and they have this pretty cool defensive idea here. Bishop comes out here. The bishop's stopping that, and now the rook is stopping that. So they take right here. Black's thinking, cool, next move, I'm going to checkmate them. White says, nope. And in fact, there's not much else to do anymore. That was our only threat, really. We could try to put a rook here, but then white will just simply come in for a check. Say the rook blocks it. Check right over here. King needs to move. And by the way, white is covering that pawn, so actually black has no threat in this position. So white can just play whatever they want, actually, in this position. And as it says, white has a huge advantage. In fact, they have a mate of 6, apparently, if they play the best move. But that's certainly not the best move for black. All right, let's come back to the original position. H takes G6, blunder. We tried queen to B4. What if they say, you know what? Let me try to use my rook and threaten checkmate on A2. Well, that again does not work. Because this check happens, we can't checkmate them while our own king's in check. That's for sure, so we get out. They take, no more attack on A2 anymore. King takes here, and good rule of thumb, when a pawn is attacking your king, always look to see if you can use it as a shield, actually. So in fact, this is the best move in this position. We're going to use their own pawn to help protect our king, because our king is not on either of those squares that the pawn is attacking, and you can't sacrifice against your own pawn. So it's actually can be a good shield. And in fact, if they had taken that pawn, it goes from a winning position to, ouch, we're in big time trouble here. We only have 3 moves, they all lead to mate. So the easiest one is that, mate right away. They go over here, they get in your face mated like that. And finally, if they go back, check, king goes in the corner because it has to, and mate. Alright, so that is, well, that is not what black should do, because white could have played king to b1 with a large advantage. Alright, and finally, the try that was most recommended, but when I posted this on Instagram, was queen to b6, going for that same mate. And this one actually does not work either, because they're gonna take here again. The rook takes back. Definitely don't take that with your king, by the way, because that's mate right away. So rook takes back, queen comes in for a check, boom, boom, and attack diffused again. Alright, so let's go back to, kind of seems like this move was pretty awesome. Continues their attack. It actually is, okay, there it goes. It was using the computer for a second, actually, too. Alright, so the final move that we have not considered is the only good move, and it was rook to b1, check, sacrificing the rook. Alright, so obviously the king has to take it, and we come over with the other rook. Now, a lot of people don't get, by the way, queen to b6 was also a good move in this position. A lot of people do not get this answer because they think, okay, the rook was already here, so why does it matter if this rook comes over here? Now we're down 8 points. So this looks terrible at first. Obviously, if you're playing a real game, you don't have that evaluation bar saying that you can checkmate them in 6 moves. But let's see if you guys can figure out what is the point of sacrificing that rook just to get this rook over to the square. Well, let's carry out that line that we just looked at with queen to b6. Last time there was a rook here. And also last time they played g takes f7. We couldn't take it with our king because of mate. We should still not take it with our king, by the way. This time, or last time we took with our rook. This time we don't have a rook here, which means king to f8 is possible. And again, we're using their own pawn as a shield. And in fact, because of that pawn and where our pieces are, they actually have no checks at all. So they have to be on the lookout for this checkmate, by the way. And they can't just simply do that, saying, cool, I'm guarding that checkmate now. Well, you're not guarding that one, though. So they decide to try their best try, which is bishop to a3. And so now they're saying, okay, I'm stopping that. I'm stopping that still. But the bishop can take their bishop. And that, by the way, was an important reason why we should not go there. Because then the bishop couldn't take it, only our queen could take it. And that would actually not work. We're going to see why in 1 second. So the rook comes over here, and again, if it was just the queen here, this wouldn't be a big deal, but we got 2 pieces controlling that square. So the bishop comes in for a check. Would be a mate, except they can take it with the rook. They cannot take with the king because it's double covered, actually. We only need 1 cover, but it has 2 covers. And the rook takes there. The queen comes in for a check and mate. And man, that was a nice comeback and really good job of black looking at their opponent's resources in the attack. So let's actually go to the very beginning when we blundered with h takes g6. Let's see if we can pretend we're white here. And how can we also take into account our opponent's resources, which we now know is rook to b1 check. Hopefully you guys said bishop to c4. Still having a strong attack, but very importantly, we can block off anything on the b file with bishop to b3. We're also covering our weak point on a2, and this move just diffuses everything, actually, because of those 2 things. Black's best try here is queen to b4, going for the mate. But again, we can go bishop to b3, blocking that queen's access to b1. Pawn comes down to try to kick this bishop off the square. But look at this. a3, kicking the queen out. Now the bishop comes back, slides back to a2. And look at these bishops just covering everything. Diffusing the attack. White's up 3 points with a raging attack now that they've stopped black's attack. Alright, speaking of those bishops, what if after bishop to c4, black said, hey, let's get rid of one of those nasty bishops? Well, white just continues their attack this time. Check, take, check, boom. We're using their pawn as a shield, and the bishop is able to block and also guard their weak point, and this is a huge advantage for white. And finally, if they continued with their rook to b1 check, strategy, it no longer works because the bishop can simply block the check. Alright, so the moral of this puzzle, and to help all your chess games really, is to never forget that your opponent is also trying to win. I see a lot of my students only looking at their own good moves, not taking into account their opponent's resources. And you can score some wins that way, but you can never be a consistently strong chess player if you're not also considering your opponent's moves. Now, don't overly freak out about what they're doing, but it is important to see, okay, what are they up to? Is my thing better than their thing? If not, is there a move that I can do that helps me but also stops whatever they're doing? So if you play like that, always taking into account your resources, but just as importantly, your opponent's resources, you will surely stay impressive. Thanks for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe, and if you can, share with a friend.